Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kevin, the editor of VRFocus, and this panel is the future of platforms for XR, which is quite a big topic, and we've only got like half hour, so I want to just jump straight into some introductions. Can we go down the line and just introduce ourselves?
Sure, I'll start. I'm Tommy Palm. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Resolution Games, and we're a game studio out of Stockholm, Sweden, that's focusing on building VR games and also recently AR games as well. We've released a fishing game called Bait. It was our first title that has more than 2 million downloads, so it's one of the big ones.
Hi, I'm Becky Jones, and I'm the founder of a company called BEKTIO. I'm an indie developer working on mixed reality games for HoloLens and Windows mixed reality platform. I've worked in the games industry for quite a while, so back in the early days of mobile, I was publisher-producer for Chilingo on Angry Birds. So I've got kind of quite a heritage in the gaming space, but you know, I'm really interested in mixed reality, and that's where my focus is at the moment.
Hello, I'm Anrick. I'm a freelance VR director, actually working across the XR spectrum. Really, I work fairly fluidly between live action VR and game engine-based VR, as well as augmented reality. So I'm fairly diverse in that skill set, but really the main focus would be writing and storytelling and then directing.
Hello, I'm John Hibbins. I'm founder of Psytec Games. We're best known for the game Windlands, but we've got a few titles out on PlayStation VR, HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, and very recently the Microsoft MR platform.
Okay, so before we dive into the future, as this panel is about, I want to talk about what's recently happened. The last year, last 6 months, how do you think the industry has changed, both AR and VR, the introduction of AR Kit, the Windows MR platforms? How is this different to last January, to last XR Connects?
I think it's become real. It's like it's a proper market now, and a lot of the, like last year if we were here, there were a lot of dreams and ambition and, you know, and yeah, it's real now. You either can make money or you can't make money. There's a proper customer base with their own demands and requirements. Yeah, so from my perspective, it's just become much more serious, and you know, it's a proper market space. I'm pleased to see it's growing. You know, the headsets are selling. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind. I'm noticing that in press as well, that VR is not here to stay. It's those, you know, VR is soon going to disappear. Stories are disappearing. Yeah, much more serious. That's my feeling.
Seems like we're all in agreement on that.
No, well, I'll add something. I think the reveal of AR Core and AR Kit was really good, because then it opened up for a good way of as a content developer, make AR games or AR apps for mobile phones. But it's also a huge challenge, because it's very different platform and very different user scenario, especially. Like, we'll make a VR game. That's something that you typically play at home in your couch for 20 minutes, so it's a very appointment gaming. You're looking at the same, you know, competing with the consoles and watching the TV. Whereas on mobile, it's a very different user scenario. So that's a big challenge, I think. If you develop something for the HoloLens or a, you know, wearable AR, that's a very different, again, scenario. So that's a challenge that we struggle with internally a little bit on how to gap that. Part of this technology is very similar, right? Developing 3D, the pipeline of making content, but other is very challenging. Is that something you recognize as well?
Yeah, and I also think that looking back at like last year's CES, there was a lot of buzz around things like Project Natal, which Intel then middle of the year decided not to run with anymore, and also seeing the Tango project dropped by Google as well. So from because I'm very interested in the mixed reality space and the spatial mapping and everything like that, and it's been interesting to see their focus shift to monocular SLAM and phone-based SLAM, and the focus being that's where the market is. So that's where I personally have seen a big change in the shift.
I think the general perception is that AR is essentially 3-4 years behind VR. It's essentially at a DK1 stage now. Do you think that's going to remain this year, or do you think AR is going to accelerate more rapidly than VR did?
I think so. I mean, I think the fact that it's already there, pre-built, completely changes it, and it is a very, very different challenge from what VR has faced and is still facing. What's interesting and very difficult, I think, as a content creator, but also as a consumer, so on both ends of that pipeline, is, and that's where the platform element comes in, is you almost have to choose out of way too many options. It's very difficult to know what to develop for, because it's true that there's a very common standard of assets and tools, but at some point you have to go for something, optimize for something, build for something. So your decisions early on in your pipeline are very complicated, too many options to support an indie team, if anything. And then same thing, I think, as a consumer, it's extremely hard to know what to invest in as a headset or as a device to get your, let's say, your XR fix. You have to make choices, and it seems like you exclude more than you can include.
So, sorry.
No, I was going to build upon that and actually say, in terms of platforms for development, Unity has done amazing things over the past year. So just like 6 months ago, just trying to pull like a video sphere into Unity was a lot of hard coding, and now it's just part of the SDK. And so we're actually seeing like a shift in the tools as well, which is great.
But from the consumer point of view, you mentioned about how you have to make hard choices. Do you really think that ARKit and AR Core are driving which phones people buy? Or is that just an extra that they get when they pick up their handset?
I think most people have the tool and don't realize it, but then there's, as a fan, as a consumer that spends money on entertainment, there's decisions to be made between AR, which isn't really an entertainment platform properly, versus whether you buy a Vive or a PSVR, or, you know what I mean? I think it's much more, it's almost between spaces as much as within the space, certainly for VR. Many options exist. If you're looking at AR, I mean, you have the AR kit or AR core elements in your hands, but you may dream about having a HoloLens as from a practical perspective for tools or entertainment for that matter. So there are choices that you are limited by, I suppose.
So what can be done to consolidate that? Where do you see the market going in 2018 for both AR and VR to give the consumer the right indications of what they need to buy in order to get into this industry?
I think all of it's going to go up. I mean, it really doesn't matter which VR headset you buy today. There's going to be some great content for it, and I think we'd probably agree with that, right? And I think the same's happening with AR. You know, whichever one you end up with, and those tools are starting to consolidate behind the scenes. With I can't remember what the name of it is off the top of my head, but you know the tool set is consolidating behind in Unity and etc. And now, you know, Unity supports ARKit as well as, you know, it's all of that sort of cool stuff that we love talking about, and obviously matters day to day to us, is really becoming abstracted to the consumer. And it honestly really won't matter which headset, whether it's the Microsoft one or the, you know, future stuff that we haven't even heard about yet. You pick up, you're still going to end up with some cool games. I really feel strongly that we're sort of moving away from the technology being the barrier now into the actual entertainment being the barrier now. You know, without the really good, great content, they're all a waste of time. You know, you need really good enterprise tools, you need really good enterprise games, and everything in between. And yeah, and that's...
I want to say something here that I've thought about quite a lot. So in VR, you have said that, you know, whatever platform you pick up, it will be some great content. Unfortunately, I think if you, as a consumer, don't know so much about tech, you walk around in a mall and you're exposed to a lot of really cheap headsets. Yeah. And we, because we work in the industry, we know that they are terrible and that you have virtually no good content other than perhaps some 360 video that you can watch. And I think that that's been one problem for adoption of VR, that, you know, people buy it as a gift to somebody, they give it to someone, and they try it, and it's a really poor experience.
And it goes deeper than that. Some of the platforms don't have quality controls, which is a bugbear of mine. I mean, it's like Steam just lets any quality go through, which self-manages to an extent. But if you pick up something you think looks cool and it doesn't work well, then that's going to be bad.
Yeah, especially in VR, where you're so committed.
You know, good VR, you've got to run at frame. You've got to.
But with Steam, by that point, obviously you've already adopted expensive hardware, and you will continue to look with these cheap headsets. If your first experience is terrible, you're not necessarily going to go and buy a Rift.
It's a short-term problem. I mean, it's like watching movies. You watch a bad movie, you watch a good movie, you realise there are good movies.
Sure.
And I think that even if you had a bad experience with VR, at some point you'll probably get exposed to a good experience. And hopefully you will, through the ambassading.
Hopefully you'll get exposed to Windlands.
Well.
I think what's exciting is actually in terms of like the price point of a lot of these headsets are now coming down as well. But a lot of them where it's been like mobile VR or even kind of PC VR, you have to have extra kit. These standalone headsets like the Oculus Go, which is going to come in at a price point of like $200. All of a sudden you've got something that's potentially mass market, where people aren't going to, you know, if they crack their screen on their phone, they're not going to have a terrible VR experience. So this is that. I think this is something that's going to be interesting this year, especially. And also the fact that like Ready Player One is coming out this year, and Steven Spielberg is directing it. So I think in terms of educating the general public about VR, there's going to be an increased discourse about it this year. So I think, you know, we're only going to see it grow.
There is a debate in the industry about what effect Ready Player One is going to have on VR, and I personally think you're right. It's going to see a boom for it. I mean, Star Wars action figures sell better when there's a Star Wars film out, so why wouldn't a VR headset sell better when there's a VR film out? But the price point, the $199 price point for Go, I'm not necessarily certain that's a big enough drop, because a Rift is only $350.
I think the Go's transformative in that, I have to say.
Really?
I think the pricing of that is, you know, at full price is just perfectly priced. The VR experience is very good, and the simplicity of just being able to put it on your head without having to slot phones in and out and everything else with sound on it. I really think that was the right strategy move, and will make a huge impact for people that just want to watch content like movies, even Netflix and so on, don't have big tellies in their bedroom or whatever, and they want to be able to experience games and content, because there's some cool stuff, including fish bait, on that device, and I think that will be transformative. And you know, I'm looking forward to a proper VR chat, like the grown-up version of it, I suppose, for business and for just doing day-to-day activity. And I don't think Facebook are quite there on that either right now, but I think at some point it will make sense that business just uses it. I mean, business is really the accelerator. It will be the accelerator. I'm not surprised that Microsoft built so many headsets with so many world PC distributors. It just needs good tools on it, and the big businesses in droves will move to it, because anything that saves time, money, or and improves efficiency, they're prepared to spend money on. Any sensible business is, and things like Go will make that easier as well. So I'm really excited for the next technologies.
I really think that a key there, as you mentioned, is this, that it'll be very easy to pop in. Right now with the Rift, I love it, but it requires a lot of tweaking, and we recently did a multiplayer experience of Bates called Date Arctic Open, where you can play 4 people together. And setting up that is a total nightmare, because you have to set up 4 PCs.
And that's through Facebook Spaces, which is supposed to be really easy.
Yes, and the hurdles of getting a demo going is insane. So that's one of the very exciting things for 2018, I think, with better standalone headsets.
Yeah, and Santa Cruz coming very soon down the line with 6 degrees of freedom, room played stuff, and very good resolution piece of hardware that is standalone.
So do you think with the whatever the VRFocus ends up being called, and obviously we know it's pretty much the same hardware, but whatever it ends up being called for Western markets and the Oculus Go, is 2018 going to become the year when it's commonplace to go to somebody's house and see a VR headset on their coffee table?
No, I think we're 5 years away from that still. That's okay. That's okay, because there's still a lot of work to do to get all the technology right. I still don't think the resolution's quite right. I still don't think the tracking is perfect enough. I still don't think that we've got quality under control. I still think there is a lot of work to do still, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was at DK1 days. Look how far we've come in such a short period of time. 3 or 4 years I've been doing this now, and it's massively improved, massively. We've not only got a market of choice, we've also got a ton of content. We've got really ambitious plans from all those providers. Nobody's pulled out yet. There's, if anything, they're doubling down and pushing forwards, and we're only on revision 1 really of the technologies. I'm super excited to see things like the stopgap perhaps of Vive Pro, and I think the next 2 years will show probably the next hands in some of the other manufacturers, and there'll be new technologies behind the rendering. There'll be new eye trackings in its infancy. foveated rendering. We have not yet really had the opportunity to spend enough time with the new AR version 2s that are coming out and the new technologies behind that. I just think it couldn't be any more of an exciting time. We've got a lot of the fundamentals right, for growth.
But it's incredibly frustratingly slow, right? Because you mentioned 5 years, and that's way too slow for most businesses. Right? And then I agree with you. I think we're starting to see good headsets, but it's going to take time and quite a long time as well. Do you think, is there anything that could be done to make this happen faster?
That's a very good question. It's a deep question, isn't it?
I mean, I think what's important, it doesn't quite answer your question, but maybe it's part of it, is that as part of the process of expanding all the technologies that we use to create and to experience these types of entertainment, we try to find a way to pull along content that exists now. It's amazingly exciting to talk about 3 or 6 degrees of freedom. It's exciting to talk about eye tracking, all these things. I mean, gloves that touch and haptics and, the void. And I mean, you can go crazy on all the cool new stuff that we're going to be doing. And at the same time, by saying that's now the standard, exclude everything that's happened so far. And the full range of consumers that we need to keep along and grow are people that are going to need a full range of types of experiences. So to say, we need more in order to make it, you also say what we have right now is invalid. And I think that's quite a tricky challenge.
I think in terms of indies as well, though, like developing for platforms, I think there's, especially for mixed reality platforms, at the moment, like a lot of the money sort of sits in doing client work as opposed to, because it's not out in consumer hands just yet. And so it's really interesting to look at things like Meta 2 partnering with Dell and sort of putting themselves forward as being this kind of workplace environment. And so from that kind of perspective, I think that's possibly somewhere, I know we're in a games conference, but looking at those other industries and areas where right now that actually solves a problem for them and we can build things for them, in the meantime being able to test out and tweak what's good user experience, and by the time it then hits at the higher level, we're ready to run with some interesting content. So it's a real juggle at the moment. It's a real balancing act of where you spend your time and how much is client work and how much is production of.
It's a puzzle for sure.
I'll have a go at it, but I don't think it's hardware anymore. I don't think the hardware's an excuse anymore. I think the hardware is acceptable levels. It's only content that will now drive growth.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to really get the answer to how do we drive growth, we drive content fast and quick. So everything from the enterprise business user cases, everything from the accessibility, everything from the hospital users, everything from the gaming, everything from the entertainment side of you, we grow as fast and as quick as we can if you want to accelerate. It's going to happen anyway, it's just going to take its time because you need to find funding, you need to get some success in order to fund your next game, and that takes time.
I agree with that in principle, but I come from the gaming industry, and I am very aware that if you have too much of this content, you can flood the market, and therefore it's no longer sustainable for developers. Do you not think that could be an issue?
That's the conundrum.
I think it's discoverability as well, though, of content, which is, I mean, Viveport, the new way that you can kind of like try before you buy a little bit on
VR in VR.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I think that's quite an interesting one because like really when you look at the iPhone, really what they did so well, Apple did amazingly well, was with the App Store, right, and discoverability. And so indies could then actually make stuff that was then going to sell because it was featured and people were going to find it.
But this was the same problem. Years went by and suddenly the only way to sell is to get featured.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then you start having publishers and developers going to publishers, so maybe there's like publishing models within VR as well.
Yeah, although I must say even places like Apple are still now incredibly open to communicating. I think it was interesting, I was at Apple in San Francisco recently, and they said their biggest problem is they don't actually know what most people are doing with their software. They need to figure it out. They want to elevate you, they just don't quite know who you are. So when you get the opportunity, that introduction is difficult, but when you get it, they're very open to helping. Fiveport's the same, and they've been incredibly helpful to me personally. But it's very, very, it's very tricky to get the introduction.
So with, you mentioned the Meta 2, we also have Pimax coming this year. John, you said earlier that the hardware doesn't matter. It's great that you've got all these options out there.
Well, I early pre-ordered the Pimax, so I'm obviously interested in some way.
So this is going to be a question and you're going to fire straight back. With all these different hardware options out there, do you not think that's going to confuse both businesses, enterprise, healthcare sector, education, and consumers? Are they going to know where to go?
Or
Very good question.
I suppose they'll go. The makers of the gear will have to go to the industry. But yeah, you got to make your bets.
I think they'll go where the content is.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, people buy things and are prepared to spend money on something if it offers value to them. You know, most people in this room have got a digital device in their pocket, right? They'll be the only person that hasn't. Most of us have. And why? Well, it's not one thing. I didn't buy it to play Fruity Shoot Fret 5 or whatever, right? I brought it because it does multiple of things. I mean, it plays music, I can connect with my friends, I can load apps and etc. And I think that it's all content driven really. And then it's like, which one do I like the best? You know, which one's got the best deal in the shop for some people? For other people, they will spend 6 months researching the next device and waiting for it to come out. And it's not any different to that. So I think that people will find that space, some will sell, some won't. They'll adapt because they'll not sell or sell, reinvest, but you know, we've got the strongest players in the market doing it right now, so there's not too much to worry about that. Those guys can float this ride and invest in the technology, and they are heavily investing behind a lot of the technologies that are required for the future, and building science labs and etc. So I don't think the consumer's going to worry too much about that. They will just do the one they really like today. Do you get a PlayStation or Xbox? You know, sometimes that's content, sometimes that's because your friend's got that one, sometimes it's because you've had good advice from somebody or bad advice from somebody. I think that's just exactly the same. It's not. It really masks the problem. The problem is fulfilling enough of the user cases for the person to want to buy it. Now, gamers, it's a fairly straightforward one. You know, here's a game you love, a brand you love. You know, Skyrim or whatever in VR. Do you want to check it out? Yeah, or no. And so that's a fairly straightforward user cases. Movie going, well, you know, it's got to be better. You know, things like Dispatch, which my colleague Nick recently worked on, is an amazing, you know, it's at Sundance at the moment, it's an amazing, compelling VR storytelling experience, and those, you know, that's what some people are interested in. We're all humans, but I do genuinely think it's a content problem right now. You may be right, prime pumping it too much may flood the market too early with things, but all the people developing that content have got to learn how to make really good VR, and that self-balances as well. The good things will show out from the bad things, and the more user cases we've got for VR, the more people will buy hardware.
I kind of feel that, you know, building games for VR, you're creating a virtual world, and that virtual world is very empty because it's a new world, right? So I think one of the key things here would be to get proper user-generated content that get user into a multi-user scenario where they can build their own stuff and have other people enjoying it. And I think it comes together with this kind of productivity and enterprise use of VR, where it has to be. I couldn't imagine a better way of creating 3D objects than in a 3D virtual environment. So I think that's going to be one of the key things that's going to start growing from a small hardcore community up to a bigger and bigger audience.
You go ahead after.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the XR itself, I mean, look what you're saying about there's so many different options, there's so many different platforms, there's so many different, you know, how do we get the message out to people? But actually, I think it's really interesting to look at Snapchat and what they've gone and done, which is they have a user base who are very engaged, who actually they're priming them really with augmented reality, but they don't tell them that's augmented reality. It's just a fun thing that's a feature that they can share, and I think that's what we should be looking at. Is like, what are the ways that we can fit into people's lives? What are the interesting experiences we can give them, and then they will kind of come to the platform in a way.
VR needs a dancing hot dog.
Pardon?
VR needs a dancing hot dog.
Exactly. Yeah.
For some people.
For Snapchat users.
I mean, I think something a little bit similar in terms of fun experiences, but that aren't specifically game-based and therefore aren't based on buying a product and downloading it is social VR. I work quite a bit with Sansar, which is sort of the follow-up of Second Life, and as a result has inherited a massive community of people And it is a space where you go and just stay. And there are others, of course, there are quite a few. I think this is really the time now where suddenly those spaces are flooding with people. You're beginning to see stories online. People are, I mean, certainly within the sensor community, are taking tours around, you know, taking groups around from space to space, and then uploading an hour and a half worth of their experiences, which you can then watch on YouTube. So there is a sort of flow of both experiences that are continuous and can be repeated at any number of times, and can be curated even. For example, in Sensor recently, they had a walking tour of all of the ancient Egypt-themed spaces with somebody who's an expert in that topic, explaining and discussing. That is a little bit very specific, but you know, that is a very interesting space. And in addition to that, they have a layer on top of that where, as a maker of 3D assets, you can both upload your assets and then sell them for a very reasonable price, up to you, to other creators who may not have those skills. So that's a part of the problem, is content creators must have all these skills and do the research and place their bets and invest in the right spaces. But once they've done that, those assets can also be used by others.
I'm fascinated with the whole user thing. The problem is with users is that they're not trained architects, right? So you can end up with quite a spaghetti junction approach of you know, if I try and build something wonderful in Minecraft, it doesn't look that great necessarily. But you can do it. I think actually the real thing is social's huge, right? Social is absolutely huge. My best experiences in VR have all been social. Either playing games with people or hanging out with people.
Sure.
Not necessarily in places like VR chat, which are very memey and like silly. All my things have been like serious meeting holding, or you know, playing actual games together, etc. And I think actually there's something that's not emerged yet, which is the serious Oasis like VR meta space. It's like that is curated, is absolutely targeted at the space of holding a family meeting or holding a business meeting or holding you know, serious business stuff. Where you can review things and whatever. So I think that is the next thing I want to see, which is not the family social. It's the serious business.
That's Altspace, surely.
I don't think so. I think Altspace falls into too many traps of that too.
Being too vague.
Oh yeah, you need to know your target audience, but it's like actually the target audience can be on a room basis or on a world basis. You know, it's actually, why not have the space like, I think there's a Skype 2.0 hanging out and it's just not here yet. Skype's really got quite bad for me, and people are using other things like Discord to try and solve it. And there's like the Skype 2.0 for me is like hold a living room chat or a serious around the table chat with whiteboards and all the rest of it, right? And it's like if Microsoft, you know, were listening right now, build that.
Well, Skype does already work with HoloLens. I'm sure you've probably tried it. But I've only experienced it in a one-way thing. So you've got one person, a desktop or a laptop, and then the other person with HoloLens has... so the person at the desktop can see what the HoloLens user is seeing.
Yeah. Joking aside, Skype might singly be the one reason people will buy a VR headset. If they had a VR Skype today that projected a avatar of you or re-projected the room in some way so you could be in the space with your family or friends or business colleagues or whatever, that might singly be the killer app that we've been looking for.
It's a WhatsApp thing. It's a WhatsApp for VR, basically.
Oh, maybe WhatsApp make it, right? But and not in a silly way, not in an uncontrolled like consumer-driven way. In a way that you can have that, or you can have curated, or you can have. You know,
I suppose Facebook Spaces kind of is trying to do that actually. You know, by unifying your avatars, by not allowing you to have crazy...
I think Facebook are amazing, and I think they're trying to go open platform with it or whatever, but it is a community still. It needs to be community-less. That's what I really think the trick is.
It's interesting, because I mean, you mentioned VR chat before, and it's like the numbers of people signing up for it has massively exploded.
Over the holidays, yeah.
And I think because actually you don't have to have a VR headset to get into VR chat and be an avatar and move around and interact with people. And actually, so what that's doing is that's increasing the number of people. It does mean there's a fair number of videos online of people trolling people and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you know, it's hitting that tipping point where it's like, are there enough people in there that more people are like, oh, I'd like to join up because my friends are in there, and it's...
Do you not think that artificially inflates it though? If they're just coming in and not being VR, that just makes this VR application that's not actually VR look better. It doesn't actually boost VR as a whole.
Well, I mean, if you think of kind of like social games and like I hate using this terminology, but the idea of the whale, which is the person who, out of 100 users, there's one person that will pay a lot of money, and there's 10 people that will pay a little bit of money, and then the rest of the people won't pay anything. And everybody else who's there increases the the experience for the whale in a way. And so for the person with the VR headset, if there's a community in there and you don't feel alone, well, does it really matter that they are actually in the VR space themselves? I don't know. I think, yeah, maybe it's artificially inflating it, but if there are people there and you can have an experience, otherwise VR can be somewhat lonely, right? So.
Sure, well, I think that's, again, what Facebook Spaces was meant to, it was starting to counteract, but again, is it 4 people that are limited in spaces at the moment? I can't remember.
Yes.
I mean, they've got ambitions, obviously, to be hundreds, but how long that's going to take them is another matter.
In Sensor, we've had 40, 50 people at the same time. And all in a group, you start to get some issues, but large groups, you really feel like you're part of a community. It's pretty powerful.
It's almost the answer for everything. You've got you can have the best seat at the sports. You can go to the cinema and watch it different. It's. And then the social VR is just in its absolute infancy, and I'm gobsmacked there aren't more people attacking it from different angles, because there are already a precedence in mobile of many communities of social apps opened up, and we've talked about Snapchat, but you could say Instagram and Twitter, and they're all just social communities with their own focuses and niches and ways of doing it, and VR is just the prime for this. And just board game clubs, and then games also back onto that. So games like all of our games just back into the social environment. So actually, you can step into our game and play the game, and give us that creative opportunity to curate a space for somebody to enjoy a racing game or a Spider-Man simulator or whatever happens to be.
Well, again, I think you were right earlier, you guys, when you said about the VRFocus and the Go changing things. That's going to lower the barriers for people who wouldn't necessarily want to see a social experience in VR through a complicated system. Suddenly they can just whack something on their head and be with their daughter that's at university 400 miles away. Maybe that's barrier needs to come down, but again, the price point's got to be right for that as well. You can launch all these social applications for free, but if the hardware's the barrier, then we're still going to have issues, I feel.
I think also where you've got people who don't enjoy using smartphones as well. I mean, they do exist. Like, my grandma doesn't use one, but I might buy her an Oculus Go, because then we can hang out in virtual space. I don't know. But it does mean that people that actually, had barriers before no longer have a barrier for that. So.
Well, I often use my mum as that barrier. She's literally only just got her first smartphone. She's quite young. She just doesn't like technology. But I still think we're a good 5-6 years away from the point where I can convince her to wear a VR headset. She's played since I was a child. She's played video games with me once, which was with the Wii Sports. No interest in playing them again. Doesn't own a laptop. Got no interest in technology. I still don't think necessarily that Oculus Go and Vive are quite there for her.
Yeah, I guess what's the Wii equivalent, right? Because we've got the equivalent of PlayStation, Xbox. What's the casual gaming console version of? But
that won't be put in the cupboard after Christmas and forgotten about for the next 10 years.
That's okay. We're on a cycle. That's
So we've only got a minute left, and we've already covered this quite a lot. But I just want to go through and get a tip in case there's any developers in the audience. What's the one thing you can do this year to avoid massive failure with the audience we've got flooding into VR right now? Let's start with you, John.
all right. Get 10,000 favourites at least on Steam before launching on it.
That's a pretty good tip.
That's what I would advise.
If you're creating content, think about what happens after you've launched it. Think about what's next. Try to be prepared for it. Build it into the very first version if you can.
Well, I'm kind of more looking at mixed reality platforms. So I think for me at the moment, like the challenge is actually around like funding for content. So actually, rather than a tip to everybody out there, I'm kind of like saying, hey, investors, please invest in content for this. And you'll have more people creating compelling things. And so there are some things with like Immerse UK and networks like that. Find those networks because there is some funding in the UK for this. But try and
convince them of the rising tide.
Pardon?
Convince them of the rising tide, the investors.
Yeah, exactly.
If they invest in content, then all the content will get better and they'll get more returns.
Sure.
I would go back to like be very agile and how you develop things. Get something that you can play yourself in an early phase and continue from there. That's one of the big learnings from my days in game development.
So the clock has changed, Sammy.
You can have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
You want to open it up to questions to the audience?
Yeah, sure. Let's throw it out then.
Yeah. Does anyone want to ask any questions to the panel? Come on.
Anything, come on.
There's 2 VR journalists sitting in the same row there, and neither of them have got a question. It's terrible.
Hey, okay.
This is a question for Becky Jones. You said you were an independent developer. How tough? I'm thinking about becoming one as well. How tough is it to work alone? Do you have a small group in your that you do your QA for you? How much has your previous experience before 2 years ago helped you in the last 2 years for your venture with the Holo?
Sure. So actually, I am my studio, so it's just me alone at the moment. So I've been doing mostly kind of prototyping and running off kind of my own savings, actually. So I would definitely say make sure you've got some level of runway if you're going to do this, because it is a slight punt, really, and then build something that then people can see and potentially invest in. Like, luckily, I've worked with a lot of great sort of developers and designers before, so I've got quite a few friends that I can reach out to, because it can get very lonely, actually, when you're just so it's just you and mixed reality space. So that's, yeah, it can be a hard journey. I would definitely say find communities. So there's like a HoloLens developer group on Slack. I found them I just followed all of the people on Twitter who I could see were HoloLens developers at the beginning of my journey, and one of them said, hey, we've got this Slack group. And there was like 500 developers, and they're all sharing their stories, which is great. So finding communities, finding your peers, because they do exist, and we all want to share ideas and make the platforms better. And then kind of meetup groups as well. Like we're running, well, there's some brilliant ones like Augmenting Reality as well. You can find some fantastic communities. So I'd say if you're going alone, don't just lock yourself in a room, go and talk to people, show people what you're doing, and yeah.
And just lastly, QA, do you solve your...
At the moment, I'm just sort of doing stuff myself.
Right.
But I am actually looking at kind of potential like QA partners. But at the moment, a lot of them are focused on VR. So it's like this finding a QA house for HoloLens is...
Goldsmiths have something very interesting if you research a little bit. Goldsmith, I met them yesterday. They're developing interesting tools to evaluate content and use very interesting metric tools to give you results as a process. So interesting. Have a look at that.
It's called, sorry,
Goldsmiths is university here in London. Goldsmiths. And if you catch me afterwards, I'll give you I have a picture of their contact details.
It's good advice to build a community as well. You know, if you release early content that's cool, there's plenty of stuff on Reddit that will follow you, and just keep updating that. People love following progress. The feedback's critical for yourself. You'll feel like you're part of a community, and it will help your own driving force behind that, because you'll get up every day and want to please the people that are enjoying what you're doing, and they will be quality testers for you in a subversive way.
I think even really, really big names in the scene will actually reply to you. So basically, never hesitate to reach out. And hey, if you don't hear back, maybe people are busy. But by and large, it remains an incredibly positive, supportive space in my experience.
Yeah, and I found that, the Microsoft developer outreach guys are actually really good in the UK. So they're very friendly. Just pop them an email. I can give you their contact details if you want. Yeah.